بدأت الحكاية منذ مئات السنين بين القبائل العربية في صحراء الجزيرة القاحلة، عندما تولد عشق بين الجواد والفارس. ورغم كل الظروف القاسية استمرت شعلة التلاحم بينهم حتى يومنا هذا. وقد حظيت الخيل العربية على مر السنين برعاية إلهية سخر فيها العديد من عشاق الخيل الذين حافظوا على هذا الإرث العتيق جيلا بعد جيل من المشرق إلى المغرب.
Bint Zafarana was also one of the mares that was picked up by you at the first time, the first visit to Al-Zahra.
Right. She was, well, Bint Mabruk was my choice. Bint Zafarana was Don's choice, although we agreed on both. And when we decided that we would take three, we looked at all the fillies that were available from that foal crop, the yearling crop, as well as some of the older horses, because Dr. Marsafi said he would sell us something older if we wanted. For example, he would have sold us the black mare Moga.
Moja.
Moja.
Shiba Anta?
No, she was an El Saria daughter. She was the mother of Nala.
Her mother is Antar daughter?
No.
No?
No.
She's a Hadban.
She's a Hadban. She was El Saria, and I think Yosria or Bint Yosria, one of those.
Yes, Moja. Yes.
But the more we thought about it, the more we thought we'd rather take the yearlings. And so Bint Zafarana was our next choice. Her mother Zafarana had traced back to the old Bint Helwa, the Ghazala line. It was a very famous Siklawi line. So both of the fillies were Siklawi, but a little different branches.
Yes.
She was more the old line to the blunt Bint Helwa, Ghazia, that group. And very athletic, very, very well balanced, relatively really strong hindquarters. This mare could move, and very upstanding neck. She had not a super long neck, but it was long enough, and a very clean throat, very high set, pretty head, nice eyes. Really very nice filly. So then Don said, if we're going to take the two fillies, we should take a colt. And of course, that's when we decided on Ibn Halima. Yeah. So those were our first three. And then, of course, they were all three by Nazir. So yes. Was that smart or was it not smart? Well, it turned out that it was pretty smart because they were of different strains, or I should say different families. And they were somewhat different in type, of course.
Yes.
And breeding them together worked very well for us in the early days, because you have to remember there weren't any Egyptian horses to speak of in the States at that time. So when we started a breeding program, there wasn't anything else other than the Babson horses.
Prislav was there?
Prislav was there,
yes.
Yeah, but I would never have used Rashid, and
yes.
And his mares were not the quality of those two, other than Bint Moniette, at the time anyway, the original imports.
Yes.
So.
But at the time you picked up these horses, did you have any idea of the idea of inbreeding?
We didn't have the idea of breeding at all.
So you just picked them up.
We wanted them to have as riding horses and to enjoy when we went back to the States, and maybe breed some, but we had no intention of ever starting a breeding farm per se.
So you did not have the idea of making ansata?
No, not in the beginning.
Okay.
But we did go to Babson before we agreed to purchase the yearlings, but when we went home, before we solidified everything, we did go to the Babson farm. And because we thought, if we're going to put out that kind of money, and you were just starting out in life, we wanted to see what these horses could do if you bred them, and what they were like as a breeding stock and for riding.
Judy, did you know that Babson was there before you bought the horses?
Yeah, oh yes.
You knew of him?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. We had much correspondence with him. As a matter of fact, we had a lot of correspondence with the registry.
Yes.
Which...
so there was a registry at that time?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The registry started, I think, in 1916. And before you... At the time, when we were thinking about importing either from Turkey or from wherever, I had a lot of correspondence with the registry, including Babson. And I still have some of the letters, and I remember him saying, well, if you're going to... I believe it was the registrar, not Babson himself, that said, if you're going to import something, you better import something really good. Because at that time, they had to be approved.
Yes. Approved as a horse?
As a horse, you know, the quality.
Not only the pedigree?
Yeah. No, the pedigree had nothing, yeah.
Yes, pedigree and how they look.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, of course, they couldn't hold that up because of antitrust laws, but that was their rule at the time, and they could turn you down. Of course, you could fight it, but...
But what, you have to take the horse to them, or they'll come to see you?
They came to see you. They came to inspect the horses, absolutely. So I had a lot of correspondence with Babson, who at that time was the president of the registry. And
how old was Babson at that time?
Well, he was in his 80s, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
Because I think, or early 90s, because when we went to see him, he was in his 90s.
And that was in
That was
60s?
in 79.
79.
I mean, sorry,
59.
59, sorry. So, yeah, I had a lot of correspondence before we imported the horses. And, I mean, that's a whole nother story, which ended up in my doing all the research that I did, because at the time we wanted to import, the United States Department of Agriculture did not recognize Dr. Ashub's stud book, that 1948 stud book. They did not recognize that as a registry. And consequently, they did not recognize these horses as being purebreds.
Yes.
And consequently, we would have had to pay taxes on them. So that's when I started doing a lot of the research, because the registry, the USDA required any registry to have at least 3 generations that they could document. Not just not a desert bred. It had to have 3 generations.
And the USDA, the United States Drug Administration?
Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah, they approved everything that came in.
Okay.
And they set all the rules for quarantine and customs and so forth. So that's eventually I got them to accept the Ashub book and then the EAO. And then we didn't have to pay customs. But that's another long story. I mean, we could go on for ages, because it affected a lot of the imports even later on.
You paved the line.
Believe me.
Yeah.
Not just for me, but for Marshall and Klein and Lober and everybody else that later on brought horses in.
From Egypt.
From Egypt.
Yes. Were you involved also in some of the imports of other people, helping?
Oh yeah, Don was with the big group that came in, that had Hansie's horses and Doug's horses, and it had some of ours, and it had Lober's horses and Klein's horses. I think it was two loads. We were living in Egypt at the time, and he flew back with. He helped to load them. And we had, our house was like a hotel. Everybody was coming and going, and we were involved a lot.
In Cairo?
In Cairo, because we were living there at the time.
How long did you stay in Cairo?
I guess I was the first woman back into Egypt after the 6-Day War, which would have been 66, and we stayed until 70, sometime late in 70. Then we moved to England.
Did you know Dr. Nagel at that point?
I met Nagel in 60... I can't remember, it was 65 or 66, just when it was. I remember, if I remember correctly, we met in the old Shepherd's Hotel, and I think I was having lunch with Jim Klein, and it seems to me at that time is when I met Hans. But it was around that time, yeah.
Very interesting.
A lot of interesting things happening in there.
Yes.
That nobody will ever know about.
Would you have saying that Bint Maysuna had this different influence than Bint Mabruka on the program?
Well, she didn't have much of an influence because we didn't get that many foals out of her. She had a really beautiful filly by Ibn Halima that died. I think she had a heart attack. I mean, she was like a yearling or something. And then she had Abu Sudan, and he was a definite influence. Yeah. I just wish we could have used him more. But she was an older mare when we bought her. Part of her nose had been, her nostril had been cut, her tail had been cut off, and but she was a very elegant mare and super moving mare, and sweet, very sweet.
So her influence only came through Abu Sudan.
Right.
I see.
And that was a powerful influence if you look at the mare Sudara.
Yes.
I mean, if he'd not sired anything but that one mare.
Yes.
And which is really kind of tragic. He did sire some other nice mares.
Yes.
That have gone on and produced, but she just became a superstar producer. Yeah.
Well, that tells you that every horse has a role to play in the program.
Absolutely. You know, you can't. One stallion is never going to do it all. People that think, oh, do you like this horse better than that horse? I mean, this stallion better than that stallion. Well, two full brothers, for example, can be quite different and produce quite different, and you may like one better in one respect and the other better in another respect, and yet both can be very, very useful in a breeding program.
Well, maybe people look at it because they want one or two breedings, but so that's why they pick up maybe the nicest of them. But in a breeding program, you need them all together to play a role.
Yeah, and there again, one stallion may give you something more that you need, and the other stallion you might not even want to use. Maybe he doesn't fit. And there again, sometimes you have to try, because you don't know which one's going to produce what until you actually see something on the ground.
You know, I agree with you on that, but many people use that statement in a different way, is that you have to try, then they keep trying every horse. Where do you stop? You know what I'm saying?
You stop with quality, and you stop with the right kind of pedigree, because blood will tell, but at some point you have to stop. I mean, you can't keep doing it. I know von Zantner, for example, bred, he found a certain combination that worked really well, and he would try the same stallion with the same mare 3 times. We did the same thing, and it worked very well, but you didn't always get 3 individuals of the same quality or of the same look. Each one of those may have had something special that they carried genetically that the other didn't. So there again, if you know the pedigree, and especially the influence of the grandparents, where so many people look to the individual horse rather than looking what's behind it and what's going to come out, because heredity often jumps a generation. Yes. Most always does. So it's, you know, it requires a lot of study and a lot of tenacity and a lot of luck.
Yeah, you need a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is required. And nowadays, you need a lot of money too.
No kidding. Everything has gone up. So many things have changed, but that
Would it be okay to ask you how much you used to pay for such horses at that time?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No. I think I don't remember what Babson paid. And you have to remember that the value of $1, say in 1932, when he imported his horses, in comparison to a dollar value when we imported our horses, in comparison to a dollar value today,
it's a lot. I
mean, when we bought our horses, it was a lot of money for what a dollar was valued at in 1959. $1 was $1 then. And when we decided that we wanted to buy the 3, we went to Dr. Marsafi, took us to Dr. Afifi, who was the Director General at that time. And if you see any of those old pedigrees, you see his name is stamped on there. And he said, well, we're willing to sell you those 3 yearlings, but it will be $15,000. You know, we'd just been married a year, not even a year, and we didn't have much savings. And we said, you know, there's just, we went back to the hotel and we said, you know, we really want those horses, but there's no way we can pay $15,000 and still ship them home.
What at that time, what would $15,000 get you? I mean, what would $5,000, which is a price of age, for example, can buy a car? $5,000?
Well, I guess you probably nearly could. I can't remember. It's been, it seems like so long ago.
Yeah.
Even a farm for $20 or $30,000, you could buy a small farm.
A farm.
So anyway, we went back to the hotel and we said, oh, you know, there's just no way. We'll just see what we can do. We'll talk to them because, you know, maybe they'll come down. So we went back and Dr. Afifi said, we said, you know, there's just no way we can pay $15,000, but we'd really like to have these horses and take them home and you know, promote them to a degree so that people knew that they were there. And he said, well, I'll tell you what we will do. He said, we will give you the 2 fillies for $10,000, and for the other 5, we will give you Ibn Halim as a gift. So we paid $10,000 for the 3 horses, in essence.
In a way, yeah.
But the nice story is that Ibn Halima was the gift, and that's why when I wrote the book about him, I wrote Ibn Halima, the gift. And then Ben Bukra, I think we paid, and of course she was crippled. We didn't know whether she could ever have a foal or not.
How old was she when you bought her?
Well, we agreed to buy her when she was a yearling. And then the African horse sickness hit. No, the African horse hit all of this part of the world, and the USDA shut down everything. As a matter of fact, when Doug Marshall bought his horses and he shipped them to the States, they had to come back.
Wow.
It was awful. So we couldn't buy her at that time, and then finally when they lifted it, I think which was in '64, they said, well, do you still want her? And we said yes. So we paid $1,500 for her, which was still for something that they would not guarantee could ever have a foal.
But they didn't have anything out of her?
No, they bred her to Salmon, put her on a ship.
No, before that?
No.
Nothing?
No, she wasn't old enough.
How come? Oh, what year was she? What year she was born?
She was born in '59.
Oh, yeah. So she just
So she was
started
just about,
breeding.
just about. I think.
So when you say crippled, what was wrong with her exactly?
Well, a gate fell on her, and her pelvis was knocked down. I mean, if you look at the old pictures, and that's kind of the story that I'm writing about in doing the book about her, because I can imagine what, as a foal, she must have gone through. Her whole pelvis was knocked down. Her whole hind leg was atrophied so that it was, it was turned and it was stiff. She had several bumps on her front knees. And, when she walked, she had to kind of hippity hop because that leg was stiff.
She couldn't run.
She could run.
She got where she
could run, yeah.